Before we get started, just a reminder that you can find all of my available rental properties on my website at marcguzman.com. If you own investment property, click on the Owner Services section to see our complete list of services. This episode and wine tasting is sponsored by Lenny Clark with Prime Lending. Lenny Clark is a loan officer specializing in residential home lending. He communicates with you every step of the way, and his honesty sets him apart from the rest. He's able to think outside of the box due to his experience and is able to tailor a loan program to fit your needs. If you can't qualify just yet, not a problem. He will let you know what you need to do in order to be ready. Lanny is also backed by Prime Lending, which is one of the biggest and fastest growing lending banks in the nation. They have simplified the home lending process down to 5 steps. And FYI, step number 5 is to relax and enjoy your new home. So contact Lenny Clark today at 510-964-0620. Like any city, growing up in Oakland can have its challenges. For Pendarvis Harshaw, he turned his experiences of growing up in Oakland into the book OG Told Me. The book is a collection of advice he obtained over years in hopes of passing that knowledge down to kids to make their growing up experiences a little bit easier. Today, we have him on the podcast to talk about his book and dive into his experiences in Oakland and how he hopes to see a better world for the next generation of Oakland youth. You're a fan of red wine?
Yeah. More of a red wine than a white wine kind of guy. This summer I've been doing like rose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Am I fun? It is. I'll turn this off. So you've been into what you said? Rose?
Rose, yeah. Rose.
Okay. Rose, yeah.
Somebody, I don't know, maybe it just worked. Somebody said, yeah, this is summer water. I was like, yeah, summer water. That shit sounds nice. I'm just going to drink it all summer.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. It's something that, like, not too heavy. It's not too light.
Yeah. My girlfriend typically likes to start off with, like, rosé or, like, a white wine because to her it doesn't really feel like drinking. Right. Once you hit the red wine, it feels like you're drinking.
You're getting there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this after, a long day, even last night, it was like 11 o'clock. Everybody in the house asleep. I got some reading and writing to do. I pour a glass, and then after that, have some tea. And that way I've, have my little tipsy, and then wake myself up with some tea and call it a night.
Yeah. So are you just like a general wine drinker, or are you like trying to become a connoisseur or like really into it?
If I had the money and time, I would love to. But yeah, I'm just general. I think really it's about the social aspect of it.
Yeah.
Bring people together and drink. And then you can drink bottles of wine more easily than you can drink bottles of Hennessy.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Trader Joe's actually has some great selection of wines for $5.
Yeah?
Yeah, and like really good wines that, like if you're really into wines, they should be priced way higher. But they buy them from they bring them from different regions. So Portugal, they have really cheap wine out there. There's a really good Portuguese wine. It's got a photo of Lisbon, their capital, on it. Yeah. There's one wine from, where is it? Hungary, I think? Or Austria. I think it's Austria. So an Austrian wine, also $5. And so they have a great selection of $5-6 bottle wines that are just phenomenal wines. And they're, $5. You can't beat that for a bottle.
Yeah, exactly. And when I'm at the $5 point, I usually go to like the grocery outlet kind of thing.
Yeah.
I found that, you can find some quality wines there too. Well, at least quality. They taste good. But I've never checked for Trader Joe's, so noted.
Yeah.
I have to look it up.
Yeah, I think people are just tired of buying their $2 chuck, and I think they kind of caught on to that, and now they're deciding, okay, well, they're willing to pay a few bucks more. Let's give them some quality $5 wines.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
The next level up.
Yeah.
Because I did used to buy the $2 chuck by the case.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a doorstop at one point.
Yeah. Yeah, when it first came out years ago, I want to say it was like 2000 when it came out. It was like pretty good wine. And then they just kind of really mass produced it, and then I think the taste of it just kind of dropped a little bit.
I mean, I used to throw parties in the backyard, so I don't think people were tripping off the taste. Like,
Yeah.
what? Oh my God, this isn't. No, not at all. Yeah, people would just throw that back, especially late night.
Yeah.
Like that's what you have left. Cool. Pop all the bottles, get them going.
Yeah. So thanks for coming on to the podcast. I mean, I'm really excited for this and appreciate you coming out from Oakland, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So one thing I like to ask people is what has your attention right now?
Today,
Could be today, could be this week, movie, book, music.
my attention right now is wrapped around this concept of undercurrents and how we keep dealing with almost like little offshoots of these undercurrents. So you'll see an incident in the news, and if you look back 6 months ago, you'll see a similar incident. And so there's a connecting undercurrent. Say something such as like the Me Too movement. You talk about Nia Wilson's death in Oakland and how the community rose up around that. And then you take, for instance, what's happening in Congress with the Kavanaugh hearings of last week and that continue on to this week. And so seeing instance after instance of like social gatherings around women's rights or civil rights, human rights, if you will, and how they present themselves. So yeah, I'm just thinking about like the undercurrents. What's the underlying theme underneath these like almost isolated incidents, but they're not isolated at all. So yeah, that's what has my mind, and I guess that comes from being
They probably appear isolated just because of the amount of attention they get, but they're all connected in some way, right?
underneath. Exactly. Yeah. Definitely isolated in terms of it's reported it happened on this day, but underneath it, it's intertwined into a larger narrative, a larger story about what's going on in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about your life as a kid, your goals, and growing up. You were born and raised in Oakland?
I was raised in Oakland. I was born in Columbus, Ohio.
Okay.
Fun fact. Yeah.
Really?
I stayed there until I was like 2 or 3. I was like, Mom, it's cold. Let's leave.
Okay.
Yeah. I was. All I know is Oakland. I've been to Ohio like twice. I spent 4.5, 5 years in college in DC.
Okay.
But yeah, for the most part, Oakland all my life. I've lived on all 3 corners of the town, and then Berkeley and Richmond as well.
Mm-hmm. How you like living in Oakland, growing up in Oakland?
I love it. Yeah. Sometimes I question what I would be like if I grew up in New Orleans or New York and had one of those type of accents and like that experience. But I really do value growing up in Oakland and who it's taught me to be, and yeah.
Mm-hmm. Have you noticed? You said you lived in Berkeley and Richmond. How do those cities compare to Oakland?
Very similar, especially after you travel a little bit. Richmond, Berkeley, Oakland, small differences. Um, After reading about like the development of the cities, you see where people came up from, especially the black community came up from the South, different parts of the South, and landed in different parts of the East Bay. So you can see where the etymology, the roots of the differences amongst the city are. But yeah, small differences, and then as you get closer to home, you can start seeing the differences a little bigger. You can tell the difference between somebody from East Oakland versus West Oakland. All of that.
Mm-hmm. What would be the difference between some from East and West Oakland?
Oh, you're gonna get me jumping into stereotypes. There are differences. They exist. I'll just leave them there.
So as a kid, I mean, who were some of the people that you looked up to as role models?
That's a good one. I want to say role models. I'll say I take different aspects from different people and kind of quilt together this concept of what it means to be a good human. And that could be anybody from my mom, my sister, my aunt. Those are like my foundation. And then, people you see on TV, anyone from a Ken Griffey Jr. to a Martin Lawrence to I don't know, you name it. So you would try to take different aspects of different people's personality and build your own. So a lot of folks.
Okay, so you never really idolized one person?
It depends on what I was doing. When it came to rapping, I was like, man, Nas is tight, so is Too Short. When it came to playing ball, I was like, I like Ken Griffey Jr. I also like Roberto Alomar. So yeah, there was never one individual who I was like, I want to be them.
How was your experience going to college in DC?
DC was also cold in the winter. I love the summertime out there. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was at a major pivot in the city. I guess the city is in a constant pivot with all the changes that are constantly happening there. But yeah, being there for President Barack Obama's first election inauguration, the whole
Oh, you were
nine.
there.
I was there for it. Yeah, and
That must have been
I was
amazing.
doing journalism, and at one point I was like, I can't report right now. It's too joyous of a celebration. I have to be involved in it. Um, so yeah, it was definitely dope. Um,
How many people were there? Like 2 million or something like that?
I couldn't even a lot of people, and
More
it was
than the last one.
more
More
than
than the
yeah,
last one.
exactly more than the last one for sure.
Well, according to the president, 2 billion people were there at the last one.
Man, goodness. Um, yeah, and it was a good experience as a teenager and a young man to see that city, to see Howard University, like that the diversity of people within the black community. It was tight, just Republican black people, Jewish black people, you name it. And it's all there, and that's something I'm not privy to being in Oakland.
Hmm. Yeah, DC, I've only been there one time, and I was there for just a quick real estate conference, really just 1 week. But you walk through main parts of DC, and it's a weird feeling. Like you could feel all the political power just there, right?
Yeah,
And do you get the same feeling?
yeah, political power, and also like it kind of reminded me of like Oakland on top of Berkeley on top of San Francisco, where you said political power, and that reminds me of San Francisco. It's like it's a world city for sure. And then there's a lot of colleges. It's a college town, so it kind of has a Berkeley feel. If you get into the right circles, it has that young hip vibe. And then it's also still a hood, And so you get into certain pockets of DC, it reminds you of Deep East Oakland or Lower Bottoms West Oakland. Um, and I found that in DC as well, from uptown or southeast uh, on the Anacostia. And so it all depended on what circle I was in, and that gave me a different vibe about DC.
So, at what point did you decide to get into journalism, and when do you know that was for you?
I got into journalism when it started paying me, and that's about the same time I knew it was for me. Um, I was a rapper. I used to do poetry. I liked writing. I've been writing since I could remember. Um, and one thing led to the next. It was a domino effect. Poetry led to rapping because rapping was cool. Rapping wasn't paying, and then I went to this program called Youth Radio in downtown Oakland, which a lot of people come out of in the Bay Area. Um, a lot of media makers come out of in the Bay Area, I should say. And Youth Radio introduced me into web design, video production, you name it, news, broadcast news. And what stuck with me was kind of doing a column or just voicing my opinion, and it would be relevant. It would talk about what's going on in the news, but columns and pieces that I could use my voice to analyze what was going on in the world. And that was around 18, 19. Stuff really started to sink in around the time Barack Obama was first inaugurated, which happened just days after Oscar Grant was killed. And I needed to write. It's kind of therapeutic. It was a good way to really make sense of everything that was happening in the world.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And a way to express yourself.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've also taught, also, right?
Yeah.
And at what point did you become a teacher?
Um,
And how long did you do that for?
when did I start? When did I start getting paid for teaching, or when was I a teacher? Like, I don't know. I mean, elementary school. I can remember like being in that role on the playground of like one of the kids who like the younger kids would come up to me and talk to me and ask me questions. Like I knew stuff. It's like I don't know why you even approached me, but I guess that's where I guess it was innate in me. Um, and when I started to make money off of it, or when I started to do it professionally, was 2011. I came back. The Oakland Unified School District has this initiative called the African American Male Achievement Program, and it was a pilot class. I'm teaching 20 young men any curriculum that I could design that is, as long as it incorporates some of their elements. And so I decided to bring journalism into the classroom and ask these young men to tell the story of their lives, of their community, you name it. And on top of that, had them doing exercises, jumping jacks, count the first 10, do the last 10 silent, everybody end on one accord. And it really taught me a lot about myself and my experience going through education. And so that's what I really appreciated about teaching and being in the classroom is that it's almost therapeutic in itself. It's cathartic to say, damn, that was me at 14 years old. I can see where he's thinking, I can see where this young person is going and what they've been through. And it helped having my notebooks from that time period too.
So one thing that's been said about you, and this kind of ties in with and it makes sense why kids would come up to you at an early age, is that people describe you as having an old soul.
Yeah, I got that a lot. Yeah, probably from also having like wrinkled hands,
Yeah.
old man hands.
I mean, where do you think that really comes from, though?
I couldn't
Just
even.
being an old soul.
Yeah, even now talking to younger people, certain younger people, I'll run into them like, "You have it also too." It's innate. It's not even a lived experience. I don't think so. Like it's not like I went through some traumatic experience that caused me to look like this or think like this. Um, I can just remember being young when all my homies were watching Space Jam. I was getting into Stevie Wonder songs on the Key of Life, you know.
Hmm.
And not to say one is better than the other, but that's just what attracted my attention.
Do you think maybe being an old soul is more of just trying to learn more about what's out there in the world as opposed to just being comfortable with what you have or what you know now?
I don't know. I don't know if they directly, because I know some old souls who are complacent. I know some old souls who are adventurous, you know? So yeah, I don't think it really determines either or, if I could say.
Hmm.
Yeah. Does that answer your
Yeah,
question?
yeah,
Yeah.
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 Okay, so how many years do you end up teaching young people?
Yeah. So let's see, 2011 I was teaching, 2012 I was teaching. So 2011 I'm at Oakland Tech, 2012 I'm at McClymonds. Uh, the end of 2012, going into 2013, I started UC Berkeley's Graduate School of Journalism. I'm there for 2 years. I get out of there, and then I'm teaching at Ralph Bunche, which is a continuation high school in West Oakland. And then from there, I started doing more journalism full time. Even recently, I've kind of strayed away from journalism for like a year, doing some policy work, but still got back into the work. And so I guess you could say I was in the classroom for about 5 years, roughly. Um, and even still, now I host events or do stuff related to education.
What was the biggest challenge for you in trying to teach and educate young people?
One of the bigger challenges is I don't know if it's the biggest, but one of the bigger challenges was giving people grades. It's
Really?
like I'm supposed to judge how your intelligence has grown. Like who am I to say?
Hmm.
And this is gonna dictate this person's life. Like that's not fair. Um, and so yeah, it was difficult judging people. You know, on in grade form. Like I knew what work I expected. I know where people didn't care, but those in between grades, I was like, I can't call it. I don't
Do
know
you
what.
end up developing your own
Yeah, I'm
system?
about to say I don't know what the rubric that came out of it was. That was 4 or 5 years ago when I ran into that roadblock. But I can remember saying, "Hey, this doesn't. It's not really clear." Um, yeah, it makes you really question the grading system overall. Like,
Hmm.
why do we even have this?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, if you want to get into that whole conversation about the educational system, it's got its own issues, and we've had a few educators and teachers, principals here on the show also, and it's also actually very comforting to know that they also recognize a lot of the issues with the education system and how we've always done things. And now with the internet and in the age of Google, where you can just search things, why do we have to memorize stuff and get graded poorly just because we didn't memorize it when we can literally pull it up on Google, right?
it's that saying. I mean, I'm sure you've heard this before. It's like you're not always gonna have a calculator in your pocket.
Yeah, yeah,
It's like, nope, actually, now I do.
yeah.
Um, and things have changed. Technology has definitely dictated a lot of things from health to you name it, real estate. Um, but the education system, it definitely has impacted it, but I don't think it's been incorporated as much as it can be, especially for lower working class communities. Um, and I mean, that's going to bring us to this conversation about the book. But before I say that, I want to say like that they'll talk about it like in the past 50 years, the education system has not changed. It's still that rote memorization kind of thing and being tested on what you can commit to memory. It's not cool. And I was saying it brings us to the book because that's that was one of the catalysts to me doing the book. Is that in 2011 I'm teaching a class at Oakland Tech. These young men are in the back of the class on Tumblr, like looking at whatever, and I'm like, all right, if I could just put the information I want to teach them where they're already their attention is already focused, then I don't have to deal with this conflict. Put your phone down and pay attention to me. No, I need to put my information where their attention is. I need to meet the student where they're at. Um,
That's also in business marketing. That's marketing 101. You don't just advertise where you think you should advertise. You simply advertise where people are paying attention.
right. And it makes so much sense That way you don't have to like fight for their attention. You know, you don't have
Hmm.
to appeal to their emotions. The job is already done. Just put the you know put the medicine in the food. You know, if you
Hmm.
will. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and it's going to be very interesting to see how education transforms in the next 15, 20, 50, 100 years, especially as internet becomes more and more available to the world population. And you've got companies working on little nanobots that get injected into your brain
Yeah.
and connect to Wi-Fi. That would be so trippy if that really happens. There's a evolutionary professor, George Miller, I believe is his name, who truly believes, and he announced this the other day, that in 15 to 20 years, most of the big universities and schools he believes are going to be bankrupt, insolvent. They're just going to disappear because they're so stuck in the old ways. And for them, it's just a business model of let's just finance as much as possible. The debt gets passed on to a bank, and we
Yep.
just keep making this money.
Yeah.
And that's changing with you have websites like Udemy or just people going to YouTube and learning things.
YouTube scholars are real, man.
Yeah, YouTube
One
scholars.
of my neighbors was one, man. He's like Tim the Two Man Taylor. He like will learn anything on the internet, go out and build it. Now he has all types of little cabins on his property.
Yeah.
Um,
So
yeah,
you're teaching these young people. You notice that they're on Tumblr.
right,
That made you start your own Tumblr page, correct?
correct.
And what was the name of that?
Same as the book. OG told me. OGtoldme.tumblr.com.
And so, what was your goal with that blog?
I realized I was at that, I guess you could call it the sandwich generation, where I'm talking to the young people, but I have access to the older people, and I wanted to bridge that gap. A lot of older people talk about young people as if they're like demonic. Like, I don't know what's wrong with these youngsters. Nobody can reach them. And a lot of young people don't care about the older people. Like, man, oh yeah, he's obsolete. No, they wouldn't use that word. But yeah, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah,
Essentially
they don't
obsolete.
get us. They don't
Yeah.
know how to communicate to us.
Right, exactly. Um, and so I saw that there's a void there. I wanted to fill the void. What better way to do it than to take the stories of these old guys that a lot of the neighborhood kids would see in the community and say, "Hey, you've seen this face before? Do you know his name? Do you know his story? Do you know he was once, I don't know, the janitor at the at San Quentin and he cleaned the electric chair?" And it's like, "What? He cleaned the electric chair? What does he do now?" "Oh, he collects snakes and he has a spot in South Berkeley. This is Snake Man." And they'd be like, "Oh man, that's cool," and like, um, their eyes would be open just to those stories. And then on top of that, the older people, they would feel a sense of appreciation. Like, they've never been on the internet. Some of them have never had their picture taken outside of institutions, be it school, military, or armed services, or prison. So to have your picture taken in your everyday life and to be featured on the internet, I had this one dude, Snake Man actually, he would tell me, he would show his homeboys, like, "Look, man, I'm on the internet, Google me." So it worked on both sides. Where these older guys are getting appreciation, these younger dudes are starting to learn that there is life after 21, and this is what it looks like.
So that's also one of the reasons why I started this podcast. And one of the things I found to be the best thing about this podcast is getting to meet so many different people and learning about who they are and what they do, right? And it really opens up your mind. And like I've lived in the Bay Area all my life, but until you start digging deep to see what's really here, you start discovering so many gems.
It's
And it
gems.
yeah,
Yeah,
and then you realize how beautiful of a place it is to live here.
yeah,
And I think it's incredible.
right. The diversity is much more than skin deep.
Yeah.
There's diversity of experiences and origin stories and some innovators out here just walking amongst us. So.
Yeah. One of my neighbors in my neighborhood, we had him on the podcast, and his episode's going to air a little bit later. But his name's Day Shilkret, and he does morning altars. And what he basically does, and he does these elaborate designs, but he'll go out wandering. He'll find whatever he can in nature and put together designs, take a photo, and that's it. And right now he's doing like a tour across the nation, and he's got a book also, and he's really pushing to teach people just simply go wandering. No goal, just wander, and you'll find some amazing things locally that you never knew were there.
Yeah,
And one of the issues is we're so busy in this life, and everything, especially here in the Bay Area with technology, the tech companies, everything, it's always everyone's got a goal. getting from point A to point B, but no one's appreciating that journey along the way. Even if you're just going to Uber from Richmond to Oakland, right? You're not really appreciating all the different things you're missing along the way.
You got your head down on your phone in the backseat of this Uber, and you're not trying to talk to anybody you're ride sharing with.
Yeah.
Right.
Many times, if you just talk even to an Uber driver, you get some amazing stories.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm fortunate. I'm fortunate enough to, like, I was definitely the kid. I talked about people coming up to me in the playground, inside the classroom. I couldn't stay in my seat. I'd go and talk to, other students, And to this day, I'm fortunate enough to have a profession where I go up and I talk to people and I just hear random stories. And it is even being here right now, like this is my first time talking to you, and I'm hearing your story. I'm like, this guy has a podcast and he's a real estate agent. That's crazy. Like, but it makes so much sense. Do other people know about this? Why aren't other people doing this? And so yeah, that sense of discovery is definitely something that like keeps me growing. I love it.
Well, that's also one of the beautiful things about the internet, right? I found you through an article that I saw on Instagram, and then I'm on to East Bay Express, saw an article about you, and then looking into you a little bit more, and then that's how I discovered you.
Right.
Yeah.
So there is beauty in that in the internet. So as long as that like discovery comes to real life, comes to fruition in some way, like act on it. Just don't rest on your seat, your chair seat.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you're teaching journalism to students. You discover they're using Tumblr. You start your own Tumblr page. At what point do you decide I'm going to convert this into a book?
I couldn't tell you the exact day, but I knew that I've always wanted to do a book. I've always wanted to do a coming of age kind of memoir. As I said before, I wrote poetry back in the day, so I've been collecting notes from it. So in the pages of the book, it's a paragraph. Excuse me, what do you call this? One portion, a chapter. Sorry, I couldn't think about it. One portion of it is about a coming of age experience that I had that year. The next page is like a collage of photos that kind of symbolically represent that story, that little narrative. And then on the next page, you'll find scans of my poetry. And so that amalgamation of material just came about over time. Some of the photos are directly from the website. None of the interviews from the website are in this book. I wanted the website to live alone as its own project. And this book is kind of the backstory as to why I did the website. This book is my coming of age tale of me actually bumping into OGs. The website itself is me going out and interviewing these elders for the purpose of creating a website. This book is stuff that I really lived.
Now, do you still update the website?
No, I haven't updated it in about 2.5 years, 2 years now. I got burnt out. You do a project for 5 years. You see the world a certain way of life, or you see the life in a certain way. You're like, all right, let me take these goggles off for a minute. Let me refresh my eyes. And so I published the book in February of 2017. I went on a crazy run all of last year and like spoke everywhere. I'm talking about prisons, schools, you name it.
How many locations do you think you went by?
Easily 35 to 40, easily.
Now, locally or across the nation?
Yeah, mostly here and then across the nation. A couple of places, DC, definitely. But yeah, Los Angeles, Sacramento.
Do you find it pretty hard as an author to get exposure for books? Is it very competitive?
I think what helped was the website, the Tumblr, and also this saying of like people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do. So when people saw that there was a backstory behind the book, it's not like, hey, I just wrote a book. It's like, hey, no, I really lived this experience, and this is my memoir, and this is a website to do something in society that's larger than me.
Now, when did the book come out?
February of 2017.
And where can people buy it?
They can buy it. You can contact me directly, and I can ship copies. That's how I did most of them. I think I didn't put it on Amazon because it's close to heart, and I wanted to have connections to people who I've given the books out to, sold them to. So I'm about 1,500 in, and I only used about 6 different bookstores in the Bay Area, 1 in DC, and then other than that, all books have been sold through me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, who would you say this book is really geared for?
Oh, it's written for 16-year-old me. 16-year-old me getting on the back of the bus, breaking the book out just to break some weed down on it. And then I look down at the cover and I'm like, hey, this looks kind of interesting. Let me read it until I get to my next stop. And I might only read a chapter or two in between stops. And then I pick it back up 6 weeks later and read the next 2 chapters.
Okay.
That's what it's written for.
Okay. That's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, most books, I think people write them to be read within a short period of time. But you have something that you could really pick up any time and just get something out of it immediately.
Turn to any page, you're going to read something. If it's not a full chapter, then it'll be a quote. Maybe you'll see a photo. But it's definitely something that's made. It's not nearly a textbook. I wouldn't want you to read it in one sitting, although you can. And what's been surprising is that a lot of mothers, single mothers, have told me they read this book and they got deeper insight into what their child was going through.
Why do you think that's the case?
16-year-old me wasn't writing a book, you know? So the 16-year-old who's getting on the back of the bus and breaking some weed down, he's not necessarily being an open book with his mother.
So it gives them a little bit more insight into possibly how their son may be thinking.
Exactly, and it's not, obviously, it's not like this is what your 16-year-old black male is thinking. No, it's not that at all. But here's some insight from one guy who's lived that experience. And so give you a frame of reference.
So someone reads the book, what's the ultimate goal for them? I mean, what do you want if you wrote it for the 16-year-old self?
Yeah.
If your 16-year-old self could read the book, what would be the ultimate message?
Your story is valuable. Your life is valuable. Period. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Simple. Like, if you knew that your story is valuable, if you knew that your life was valuable, you'd make greater decisions. You'd have greater outcomes.
You know, you hear something like that and it's pretty deep, but also very simple, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that we all tend to forget. Yeah. Just knowing that we're all in this life journey together, right? We each have our own story and it's valuable, and it doesn't have to be valuable to other people. It can just be valuable to ourselves.
I mean, really, one other person does wonders, but even just to yourself, that's already an act of self-defense when you start to think of yourself as valuable. But yeah, I mean, I literally published this near my mother's birthday, and I was like, if nothing else, I'll get her a copy. Printed up 100 copies. They flew out the door. It's like, I guess I'll print up 300 this time. And it just kept going. Little do I know that there were people who I didn't know contacting me saying, hey, I love your story. Thank you for writing it. It reminds me of my story. Maybe I should write my own. Like, yeah, let me know. I'll buy it, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, everyone should, you know, that's an interesting, I guess, project. You know, if everyone just kind of sat down and wrote their own story.
Yeah.
Is that something that you did with the young people you taught?
In some ways, yeah. One of my favorite questions is like, because no high schooler wants to be in the classroom, right? So I was like, if you could walk out this door and go anywhere, past, present, future, history, heaven, hell, video game, movie, where would you go? The answers I got, man. The one bigger kid, he was like, man, I'd go to the mattress store because they got the most comfortable beds. Dog, that's so stereotypical. And then the one kid who's quiet in the back, kind of spacey, he's like, man, I go to Toronto. It's before Drake. I go to Toronto if they got Fashion Week. I just want to see it. You're into fashion?
Fashion Week?
In Toronto? Why do you know about this? You're a 13-year-old from North Oakland. Like, don't really even talk to anybody. And so, yeah, that just simple questions can get into their story, into who they are. And then beyond that, now I'm not in the classroom. I teach in a prison up in Vacaville. And in
the state prison there?
California Medical Facility.
Okay.
So there's 2 of them out there. So this is like the smaller one or lesser known. But yeah, doing writing courses up there and doing exercises with guys who are like, yeah, I've never written an essay before. I do these little 6-word stories. But if you do enough 6-word stories, you stack them up and they, you know, put them together. It creates an essay and you tell your full story just through these 6 words that identify different aspects of your life.
So how do you end up doing that? Teaching journalism inside of a
prison
facility, yeah.
While I was in grad school, I got my first taste of prison. I started working with the San Quentin News. San Quentin News introduced me to writing programs in prisons around the state. Then, about this time last year, I did a story about some guys who I met in San Quentin. They had gotten out, and they were now doing they were doing prison tours. They were like riding on a boat to San Quentin to work with this arts group that does, you know, arts in prisons work. the arts group said, "Hey, do you want to teach in a prison?" I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to try it." And it ends up being the most therapeutic thing in my life, where like I can put my phone down. I have to put my phone down, and just focus on talking to people and connecting and talking about healing wounds and writing and expressing and telling your story and valuing your story. And prison, there people have concepts of prison that aren't necessarily true. Like, don't get me wrong, it's still like a prison, but it's not like if you go in there, you gotta have phone books taped to your ribs. Like, no, just be very respectful and talk to people like people. Um, and so far it's been good. I've been there for about over a year. I took the summer off, but just getting started back and really enjoying the experience.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, do you ever think if your 16-year-old self could read your book today, how would your life be different? Would it be different?
Yeah, if 16-year-old me could read this, that's a damn good question. If 16-year-old me could read this book and say, "Hey, that's what is is in potential for me, is what's gonna come of my story," um, I think they'd be more settled. They'd be like, it wouldn't be as scared, as fearful. Like, lived as a young person, I lived with a lot of fear that I wouldn't have enough financially, that I wouldn't be enough, that I wouldn't fit in, like fit in. Not like I was uncool, but fit into like the economy, fit into America's system, And like I
I feel
would
like that's a big fear even today, right?
yeah, I mean, definitely a lot of people have that. But I think I've overcome it a lot because of school and realizing that now I have a skill set and a network and degrees and like if I wake up every morning and work, I'm not going to be broke. But at 16, I was like, oh man, I'm gonna have to sell dope or I'm gonna have to do something out of the ordinary. Even with me, like at 16, I was going to a private school. I was just living in a house where we didn't necessarily have everything.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think it would have settled me a lot if I would have read this book at 16 and say, okay, you can go through some stuff, get out of it. Um,
Why do you think a lot of people have that kind of fear?
not having foresight, not having foresight at all, and it's hard to have foresight when you don't necessarily see somebody like you that's just 2 steps down the road. Like I said, like there were 3 women in front of me, and my sister was bumping her head in East Oakland in the streets. So I didn't necessarily want to be like her. And my mom was working for every dollar, like cleaning floors and going to school and everything. And my aunt a little better off, but she was still struggling. And so, um, yeah, not having an example didn't allow me to wrap my mind around. Okay, I'm 16 now, but if I just focus for the next 3 years, I can be here. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of fear. And overcoming that fear was definitely a part of optimism, a lot of optimism and programs. Programs around Oakland. I can't say it enough. Nonprofits, youth radio, the mentoring center, you name it. I was like nonprofit heavy. Yeah.
Do you see social media helping the young people today having access to maybe if they don't have it available at home, but if they see people online, that might be two steps ahead.
Yeah, no. The internet is fire, man. It's used to build and destroy. It's all about what you're interested in. Like, I know some kids who use the internet and they like who do everything and socialize, learn about politics, like use the internet for good, if you will. I know some kids who use the internet just to like clown on each other and like talk trash over video games and not necessarily getting anywhere in their professional careers. Um, so it's all about what you seek. And I think you have to have a taste of it in order to actually go out and seek it. You have to know that, hey, I could be a programmer. Let me go find another young black programmer or whatever.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, for a young person today, how can they navigate through that? I mean, if the internet is great to connect people, but it can also easily destroy ambitions or personalities and cause a lot of problems. How does a young person really navigate through that?
Guidance. Um, Yeah, you gotta seek guidance, man. I keep you're talking about it like in an abstract form, or the question comes out in an abstract form, like how does a young person? I keep thinking about specifically my niece and nephew. They're 15 and 16, and they're not radically different, but they just deviate slightly. Where my niece is a little more focused. She has the job. She knows what she wants to do. My nephew's like, I ride bikes and kick it. Like she's like 21, but she's really 16. He's like 10, but he's really 15.
Hmm.
Um, and not to knock them developmentally at all, but the things that he's just entertained and interested in, and versus what she's entertained by and interested in. And my niece goes out to find that guidance, or she'll ask the questions. And my nephew's a little more reserved when it comes to those hard hitting questions about future plans or how to make, I don't know, how to apply for a job, you know? Um, and so I think you have to, as a person at any stage in life, you have to be willing to be bold enough to ask that question that's going to move you to the next level, that's going to get you to that next door.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So you're a somewhat fairly recent father, right?
Yeah. Yep. My daughter will be 2.
So how does fatherhood mix into all this? What's that taught you?
Fatherhood like kicked in the door on all this. It's like change it all. Get rid of it. Man, fatherhood is so sweet. It's good to have that frame of like this is your priority. Everything else you can do, cool, but this is your priority. And if you can't do anything else, you have to tell people, they will understand and focus on this priority, you know? And I hold that to such a high regard growing up without a father. And it's like, damn, dude, you couldn't do that? You know, like you couldn't just focus on one thing. It's so simple. And I mean, I understand there's a lot of distractions. I didn't necessarily grow up in the dope era like that. So I don't know what my father necessarily went through, even though I've talked to him. I couldn't imagine what he's going through, and I don't blame him. I have further understanding. And I also like say I'm not gonna go down that path. It's real simple when it boils down to it. This is my priority, you know?
Hmm.
That's why I'm looking at my watch, like I gotta pick the baby girl up after daycare at
Yeah.
5. But yeah, I got time.
So, so you just felt your priority. Do you feel your priorities shift the
Totally.
day she was born?
Even before then. Before then I was stressed, almost depressed, like in between jobs, trying to figure out how I was gonna pay for a kid in California. And yeah, put the foot on the gas pedal and got a full-time job for a minute. While I had the full-time job, I put the book out, still freelancing on the side. Full-time job fell off. It's cool. I'm freelancing. I got the book. I go back to doing photos, teaching, you name it. And it, when that's when you have the skill set, network, degree, and a product in the market, then the only thing you really need to worry about is management of all those things in your time. And with that said, it's like, okay, it makes sense to me now. We're
Hmm.
not gonna starve, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the management tends to be one of the most difficult things because everything else you can, you put in the work, you get to it, right? You get
Right.
there from point A to point B. But then the management is just ongoing management all the time. That just doesn't stop.
Right.
That's got to be. I feel like it's the hardest part for most people.
In life. And I don't know what you said about that wandering, like how people are so like I have to get from point A to point B, I have to be on time. Like it's so confining. Like that is the management. You have to manage within these uh distinct lines where it becomes hard to say, I'm gonna leave my watch and phone at home and I'm gonna go walk into the forest. Like, what? What day can I do that? Never. I would never be able to do that, you know? And with that said, there is value in doing that, at least for just a minute. Take a breath, realize, okay, this world is going to be there. There's going to be constant management. There's going to be constant need to put your skills, to better your skills, to get another degree, to better yourself, and like make sure your daughter's growing up fine. But stepping away for a minute, getting that quick retreat, allows you to step back into the arena and fight a little better. Um, and that's something I'm still learning.
Yeah, one thing I've learned in just managing multiple businesses is really learning the fact that most things don't matter.
Hmm. What do you mean
Most
by
things.
that?
So most things that we stress over tend to not really matter.
Yeah.
Because if we stress over certain things, whatever it is, and if we just mentally say, you know what, I'm not going to care about this, you know what's amazing is that nothing bad happens.
Yeah.
We just put so much emphasis on so many little tiny things
Yeah.
that we forget the main focus is just enjoy life as
Yeah.
much as possible, right? And I mean, and I guess it's very easy to, right? When you have bills, you have a kid on the way, you have, you know, maybe goals that you might not have been able to achieve at the moment. Whatever the case is going on, or maybe you're broke, right? That's also a huge financial stress on a lot of people. I mean, I think it's one of the biggest stresses on people.
For sure.
So So it's one of those where it's very easy to put so much stress on ourselves for a wide range of things. But if we just took a step back and said, I'm not going to really let this affect me so much, and I'm just going to focus on my daughter's healthy, my family's healthy, I'm healthy, and maybe I'll take 15 minutes, just go wander around. And it doesn't even have to be in the forest. You can wander around your neighborhood,
Yeah.
just see what you can find there. And 15 minutes does wonders, just relaxation. Get your mind right, just calm down.
Right.
And then you can hyper focus on what your next step is at that point.
Do you meditate?
So it's funny you asked that. I've read so much about meditation, the benefits, research studies on it, which there haven't been a lot of research studies in the past, but they're doing more and more. And so it got me thinking, okay, let me give it a try. So I went through probably 6 months where I was meditating on a daily basis. And I started off with 10, 15 minutes. Within 2 or 3 weeks, that was very easy to do. Then I went to 30 minutes, and I got up to around month 2 or 3, I got up to about 1 hour per day
Damn,
where I was just straight meditating.
and that's in the lotus position and all that.
Well, initially, yeah, because I thought that's what you had to do,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then when I was reading people that teach other people meditate, they're like, no, you really don't have to do it's just how you meditate. And when I was really looking at the science research behind it and what happens to your brain, when you meditate, your neurons are 100% active, which is crazy because you would think when you're going through meditation, nothing's happening.
You
You're
should
just
calm
trying to
down.
calm yourself.
Yeah.
But your brain neurons are 100% just firing and fully active. It's very interesting, the scientific studies that they've done. And so I was like, okay, well, I don't have to be in a lotus position. I could be sitting in a chair. I could be laying down. I could, stand up. And then it made sense why, for example, my girlfriend, she used to run all the time, and she would run the Carquinez Bridge, and running there and back, I believe it's 6.5 miles. And she loves running because she zones out.
Yep.
That's the same thing. You're
Yeah.
meditating.
Yeah. Moving meditation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's monks that, and this is, I found very interesting. So there's monks in certain village in China where they live for 3 months, 6 months, something like that, at the very top of a mountain. And they maybe once a week, they make a walk down and a walk back up. And when they hit the main village down below, their goal is to do something nice for the people that live in the village. Now, here's the crazy part. This walk is a few miles each way, up and down, and they're coming down is much easier, obviously, than going up, but they're wearing a unique type of shoe that's really just wood planks, really, that's meant to hurt their feet.
Oof, what?
And they're walking on rocks and everything because they're dirt
Just
roads.
mountain, yeah.
And the goal is for them to meditate the entire way down
Not even
and
feel it.
meditate the entire way up, and they don't feel anything. And their entire goal is to understand that there's no such thing as pain. It's just a feeling. It's just something. It's very unique. It's
Yeah, I
all
mean,
mental game.
It's mental, exactly. It's your mind telling you, hey, stop doing that because it's causing damage to your feet.
Yep.
But if you can never mind that, then you can just keep on having damage caused to your feet.
Yeah, and I guess that's like for those type of monks, it's the final test. So they have to live up there with no interaction by themselves, no interaction with anyone else, and they have to make that walk once a week for months. It's crazy.
That has been nice.
Yeah.
To get that to that level of focus is something to
Yeah.
strive for.
Do you meditate?
I've tried. I won't say that I do. I definitely
Well, here's the thing. Meditation is different for everyone.
right, exactly. And I was gonna say I definitely have done things that have taken me away. Like I jog as well, ride my bike, definitely stare at the ceiling,
Mhm.
which you name it, but not your traditional meditation. I find it hard to really turn my brain off or to not get hung up on a thought.
Yeah. And it's not even a matter of turning your brain off.
Right.
It's just a matter of whatever pops in, don't worry about it, kind of push it off to the side
Right.
and just stay focused in the moment. So years ago, I would work out for 6 days a week. So about an hour and a half of weightlifting plus maybe 30 minutes to an hour of cardio right after. But that entire time was also like meditation, just completely not focus on anything else uh, except for that exercise at hand.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking about work, family, people, stress, problems, anything. It was just all about, okay, I'm lifting this weight
Yeah.
and just focusing on the muscle contracting, right?
Yeah.
And so meditation, I mean, it does the exact same thing. So everyone can meditate. I mean, I would imagine when you get in the zone of writing
Yep.
poetry, writing rap music, exact same thing.
Yeah, I can say that definitely. Writing, the things that you're passionate about, I'm passionate about. You know, when I used to play baseball, back in the day, I can remember just not thinking about anything other than like, I get the ball, I'm throwing it to second. You know, like
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, meditation is just one of those things that is still a little bit weird for most people today. But if you look at running and jogging back in the 40s and 50s, if you were a runner back then, like people look, what the fuck are you running from? Like,
Yeah.
what's your problem? Like,
Yeah.
no
Are you in
one
the
runs.
military? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But now we all know running's good for you.
Yeah.
Cardio,
Except for
right?
your knees, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, but now they also have other machines like the elliptical and stuff that simulate it somewhat.
Right.
Yeah. But meditation, I think it's going to be very similar as more and more studies come out showing the benefits. You're going to see people probably in 50 years like, okay, we all know we should be meditating. We may not all do it like fitness, right?
Right.
But we know it's good for you.
And that'd be great when they incorporate it into the classroom and it's not traditional lotus position meditation, but like, all right, kids, everybody make a beat, you know, all on one accord and just focus on the beat.
There's some schools that do that right now.
Yeah, I mean, largely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you also went to Cal, right? To their
Mhm.
journal program. How
Mhm.
was that? How was that experience for you?
It was great. It was one of the better educational experiences I had. I think my favorite part of it was that I could learn something in the classroom and directly apply it right then and there. And it just tricks the trade when it came to writing.
Mm-hmm. For someone looking to get into a career of journalism, do you have advice for them?
Start writing now.
Start writing.
Yeah, now. Start a blog, a website, whatever, and become the local corner store wine reviewer. Become the guy who does stories about shoes. Become the woman who does the story about women who are construction workers. Find something, a brand, a niche, and just stick to it. Yeah, start writing now, and you don't have to go to school for it. It helps. It helps a lot. It helps to get your name out there. It helps to expand your network. It helps your craft, but nothing helps your craft like just doing it.
And what you said is also very interesting. Just get out there, interview people. And we were just briefly talking about this earlier. Is that interviewing people does something very interesting. It opens up your mind to a whole new world. I compare it to traveling the world, right? You travel the world, and I'm not talking about going to like fancy little resorts, but you travel the world and get to know the people, the culture.
Yeah.
That opens up your mind.
Yep.
Same thing when you start interviewing people, and one of the reasons why I did this podcast. But for anyone that does any kind of business, if you do a blog or podcast or you do videos on stuff that you're passionate about or simply interviewing other people, it's amazing how that network just helps out your own business.
It opens it, yeah, real quickly. It'll open it up, and especially if the question that you're asking people pertains to something that you're passionate about, people will recognize your passion.
Hmm. Now, where do you see like the future of journalism going to in this day and age? Because you hear people talk about quality journalism, then you hear people talk about fake news, and there are perfect examples of horrible journalism where it's not even journalism, it's just like made up shit, right? So, I mean, at this point, 2018, where do you see the future of journalism going?
It's going in a lot of directions. It's definitely the Wild West. I can say that a lot of my people who I know who either in grad school or journalism school, undergrad, or people who I just know doing the work, they're looking for sponsorships. It's one thing to work for a company, and kind of do journalism for the nightly news for Channel 4 or whatever. It's another thing if you want to do a big investigative piece. Then they're looking for a fellowship. They're looking for a grant. They're looking for an organization who will get behind what they believe needs to be investigated. And I think that's the real journalism, where an individual walking down the street sees something out of the ordinary and they say, hey, I want to dig deeper. I don't have the time or money to do so. So let me write to whatever foundation. Hopefully they'll fund me for the next 3 months while I take this dive.
And there's a lot of people finding success with that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, a lot of organizations are realizing that it's needed, and it makes them look good as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that's very interesting. So you wrote a piece for KQED in response to the Nia Wilson murder and what happened. So why don't you break that down? It was a very good article that you put together.
Thank you.
So why don't you kind of just summarize your thoughts on that article?
As I mentioned earlier, I was talking about undercurrents, and how a horrific case such as Nia Wilson and her sister being stabbed at the MacArthur BART station isn't blatantly racist, it isn't blatantly sexist, but it speaks to an undercurrent that is about white male supremacy, is about the oppression that black women face in America. And it's not like this incident happens, oh my God, let me tie it back into this. It's like, no, this incident happens because this thing exists. And it's almost like a volcano erupting every so often, or a geyser just shooting off. Because underneath the surface, there is this liquid that's bubbling. And so that's what the article is largely about, and also taking ownership myself as a man, and at times being passive about sexist comments or things of that nature, which are also smaller geyser spouts or volcanic eruptions from that underlying liquid that's bubbling.
So I read the article, and I think when you hit that point, that was probably the biggest impact on me on that from that article. Is it's and you said something to where you're coming at it from a male point of view, but you feel it's also your responsibility to also help uplift the women's voice.
Yeah. I mean, as a male journalist, given my profession, realizing that there aren't too many black women in the KQED newsroom, realizing that there aren't too many black women at the UC Berkeley Graduate School of Journalism. And even though there are less black women in in the journalism school, like, I'm more than likely to get a job. It's weird. It's a weird thing, man. And so just recognizing that there's some privilege that I get with being an English speaking man. And with that said, then I need to take it upon myself to uplift the voices of other people. Excuse me. And it's something that's always been on my mind. This latest project that I've been doing with the SF MoMA, the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, is just interviewing mothers who are artists about the concept of love. And it's a 4-month project where, again, this organization reached out to me and said, hey, we'll put money up for you to write 4 articles about anything you want. And I said, cool. Well, there's just something I've been thinking about. I want to do this. And in doing that, that's me taking action toward what I was talking about in that article, about uplifting the voices of women who are doing art that need to be recognized as artists, as philosophers about love. And then even in my KQED columns, I've taken it upon myself to be more focused, to write about women as the lead character, to write about women as, in journalism, as they call the big wig, the know-it-all in the article, So yeah, no, I mean, it's a pebble in the stream, man, small rock, but that's what I'm empowered to do at the very least.
Yeah, and I guess as men, if we just stay silent, that does more damage than if we come out and verbally, you know, there's a reason why I guess you have a lot of the negative news these days, the fake news, and it's because they're loud, right?
Yeah.
A very small percentage of the people really truly believe some of the negative stuff out there, but they're loud. They're loud enough to where many people are hearing it. And that's really what the majority of the people really need to do is start getting loud about what they truly believe.
Yeah. And I mean, you would think it'd be easy with social media, right? Nah. Still, people tune into your air news stations, your public radio, um, things of that nature, and they're getting the news from the same sources. And so being able to pierce that crowd and be on the nightly news telling these stories, I think that would be the ultimate goal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, um, so Oakland. I mean, how do you see Oakland developing? After the Nia Wilson incident and Black Lives Matter, that whole movement. I mean, do you see progress being made, or is this still a big issue in America?
I mean, yeah, you said it in America. It's not just Oakland. It's definitely a power struggle, where I think it's a lot of the issues in America are class issues. Unfortunately, in America, class and race are intertwined, like they are Siamese. You can't separate them. Um, and even then, class, race, gender, and even further, however further you want to divide the pie, disability, heightist, how elitist, however you want to divide it. Those issues are just present all across America. In Oakland, in particular, there's the issue of the tech money and the people who've been disenfranchised, not only from tech but historically disenfranchised, displaced.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oakland itself is a refugee city where people from war-torn countries from all around the world found sovereignty. They found home. They created home. They actually made a living. In war-torn countries from all around the world, and Black people from the South, where it was literally like people seeking refuge as well. And so to take that community that developed from these people who left conflict zones and created a home, it wasn't always the most harmonious home, but it was a home. Um, to take that place and say, all right, forget it, we're going to raise the rent to whatever and start having wine tastings where liquor stores used to be and just completely change the culture. It's a smack in the face to the people who worked so hard to make Oakland what Oakland was in the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. Um, and I mean, of course, there's no true north. There is no true bad. There are some good things that come from it. The transportation has gotten better. The parks are cleaner. The schools are surely getting better. And now the question is, literally, the article that got published 2 days ago in this magazine called Bay Nature magazine that I wrote, is called. It's about who's it for? Who are they doing all this work for? You see your local park being cleaner. It's like, who's going to benefit from that? And it's not necessarily just going to be the white people, but it's definitely going to be the people who can afford to still call that place home.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you see a bright future for Oakland, or a different type
When
of
you say
future?
bright, are you talking about skin tone? I see a different kind of future. And like I said, it's the people who can afford to hold on. And I hate to reference this movie, but it's so good in terms of illustrating what I'm talking about. This movie called In Time with Justin Timberlake.
Okay.
And like the whole concept of the movie is like you have your time on your what how can I say, your value is shown in time that you carry on your wrist. And if you're really rich, you have millions of hours. If you're poor, you have like 8 hours until you can. You have 8 hours where you have to go out and work for 8 hours until you get 8 more hours, and that's like the cycle that you're on. And so I bring that up because what I'm seeing in Oakland is where people who have the money and the resources, they have time on their hands. They can enjoy some of the liberties that come along with Oakland. And people who don't have resources, aren't working at a job that pays over $100,000, they don't have time on their hands. They live in Tracy and they have to commute to Oakland to drive buses just to drive back to Tracy, which is 2 hours out. So you have a 4 hour commute, plus you're working 8 hours a day. How much time do you spend with your family? And so that is one of the more major struggles that I'm concerned about with the future of Oakland and also the region as a whole.
Do you have an idea of how we can get one step closer to fixing that?
There are ideas. Do I have an idea that actually works? Like, I got some ideas. I don't think they'll work though. Yeah, I guess I could talk about it now. There's this group called Y Combinator. They're like a tech company, incubation, startup, whatever keyword you want to use. They also have gotten into this idea of universal basic income and testing it in Oakland. And so I did just some canvassing with them. I really was just curious about the project. just canvassing, doing some like basic telling people about the project and getting them involved in the pilot run. And
Are they doing that pilot run right
yeah,
now?
yeah, this was 2 years ago that I was doing that pilot run with them. So they probably at the point where they're rendering results. Um,
Do you know those results?
no,
I'd be very curious on
yeah,
that.
I'd be curious as well. Like I said, I was just doing canvassing work.
There's a lot of argument for and also against universal basic income.
I can see why.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's like we might as well give it a try, right? I mean, if
What we doing right now ain't working.
yeah,
Right. And so but there is no like hard switch. It's like, all right, switch everything. No more food stamps in Section 8. Now you get universal basic income. It wouldn't work like that. Um, so I can say in theory that sounded good. You know, it would help the person who's living in Section 8 housing who has to pay some $600, $800 just to get their driver's license back. And if they get their driver's license back, then they can go back to school, and then they can graduate, and then they can get a job. So just having just that chunk of money just to get their life back on track. But if you're living in Section 8 housing, you're not getting universal basic income, and you're only getting so much money every month, then you're stuck in these cycles of poverty. Um,
yeah, I've even tossed around the idea like because I've tried to think, would universal basic income really work, right? And I think part of the problem comes down to, well, it's just money coming into your pocket, and how are you really going to spend that? And there's going to be people that irresponsibly spend it,
Yeah.
and then they're back in square one, right? So, and I think, just tossing it around in my head, if that would really be a good way to go or not, I think if you look at what would makes I guess the argument for it would be people would then not have to worry about paying bills and could then pursue whatever they really wanted to pursue in life.
Right.
And then they could add a lot of value to society because they're not held back by the struggle of just trying to survive.
Right.
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 But then, you have the problem, well, what if someone irresponsibly spends the money? And I guess, yeah, you could argue, well, that's their choice. But then if enough people do that, you end up in the same problem. Or you end up, what if it backfires and people are not motivated to do anything? Then society really doesn't benefit from that.
Right.
So then I started thinking, well, what would really make people feel comfortable in not having to struggle? Well, there's housing. Everyone needs housing. There's food, and not just any type of food, but quality food, right? And food? It's food, housing, and healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
You get sick, there should be some way to get better,
Right.
right? So I think those three. What if there's, instead of universal basic income, but universal healthcare, universal food program, universal housing program? And I think with those three, at that point, you could really go out and just pursue whatever you wanted, knowing that your food's covered, your housing's covered, and your health is covered.
Yeah. That sounds good in theory.
Yeah,
I
right.
mean, again, you're
Yeah.
gonna find that couch potato. It's like, oh well, my lower needs are met. I don't have to do anything now. I can just live here. Um, yeah. So there's no clear-cut solution to it. Oakland's problem is largely America's problem, which makes me interested in telling the story of Oakland.
Mm-hmm.
You can find so many different examples of what people are going through in America, and I mean, this is from like I know people who've immigrated from Samoa. I know people who've immigrated from Iowa. Like you name it. And I like the fact that I kind of have a social study right there in Oakland.
Yeah. So if you find out the results,
Yeah,
let
yeah,
me know where I
yeah.
can find it because I'm really curious on that. Especially if they've been doing it for 2 years, you said?
Yep. Wired did an article about it recently and called me up for it. I think that was at the start of September. I think that's the most recent written kind of publication about that study you can find. But
Yeah.
I don't think the results had been rendered yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to look that up too.
Yeah.
So before we finish the podcast here, what's your favorite spot to eat at?
Whew, my house. It's cheap. I really like Oh, the name slips my mind right now, man. This is pizza spot on College Avenue with the Chicago deep dish pizza.
Oh, Zachary's?
Zachary's. Zachary's is like Warriors playoff game. All right, I'm about to go get a Zachary's. I meet you at the crib.
Yeah, you don't go to Zachary's for regular
No, you don't.
cheese pizza.
No, you don't go like Wednesday night. I'm drunk. I'm getting Zachary's. Nah.
Zachary's is legit.
Zachary's is like, oh, your mom's in town. I got you. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so remind people if they're interested in buying your book, how can they buy your book?
Sure, just contact me directly. I'd love to give you a signed copy. My name is Pendarvis Harshaw. You can hit me on email is best. That's OGPENN at gmail.com. And then I'm also available on Twitter and Instagram, which is also OGPENN.
Perfect. So thank you for coming on
Thank
to
you
the
for having me.
podcast. Hopefully you enjoyed the wine.
I did.
Shout out to Lenny Clark from Prime Lending here in Pinole. He's the one who sponsors our wine tastings.
Nice.
Yeah. So thank you for being on the podcast, and good luck in your journalism career and everything else you've got going forward with the book.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Thank you to our producer, Sam Lubman. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share the podcast. Remember, you can listen to the podcast on iTunes, Podbean, iHeartRadio, Google Play, SoundCloud, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. For more information on my business as a property manager and real estate team, go visit my website at marcguzman.com. I really want to thank all of you for listening. It means the world to me, and I hope today's episode provides you value in your day-to-day life. I created this podcast to help showcase the many great people that live in this world and help share some knowledge that I've learned along the way in life. Again, thank you for listening. Check out our sponsors, and I'll catch you on the next episode.